Security is generated from within. It's in knowing who you are. It's being connected to yourself, to your gifts. Money is just the byproduct of you living in your purpose and, using your unique thing, whatever that is, to help improve the lives of others. When you're connected to that gift and you can solve those problems for people, you're always going to have a path to income.
Hi, I'm Chris Reynolds, and I'm on a mission to help independent financial advisors build a better business through a remarkable client experience. In this podcast, you're going to learn how to do that from my conversations with the visionaries, the leaders, the independent advisors who are reshaping the future of the financial advice industry. At the end of each episode, you're going to walk away with an actionable idea that you can take and use right now, and it will help you to build a better business today. This is Turning the Page. Well, I've been in business for more than, believe it or not, 30 years. And every once in a while, I'll meet a hugely successful person who is also very unhappy. And it always puzzled me. And have you ever felt like, you climb to success, the top of the success ladder? I meet lots of people who are at the top of their game. You feel like you're just on a treadmill, though. Yeah, I talk to them and they're like, yeah, but, I want to do something else, or I want to do something different. Sometimes they're just so focused on business, on client wins, on gaining wealth, that sometimes, people forget who they are and why they're even doing the business that they're in anymore. And you get all these gurus and coaches, and they give you a whole bunch of tips. By the way, I do this too on, how to achieve happiness at work. And, and then it just starts to feel like you're checking off a task list or something. So today we're going to talk about the curse of the high achiever and how to remind yourself of why you do what you do and how you can teach your clients the same when it comes to their investments and their lives. Here's some practical tools to achieve practical happiness. And I have a really special guest today. I have Dan Mason. Dan Mason is an international career and life happiness coach. He's a television personality. In fact, I've seen a bunch of his TV spots. He's awesome. He's a keynote speaker and the host of Apple's #1 debut podcast, Life Amplified, which I've heard and I love it. And what he does is really unique, I think. He teaches unfulfilled high achievers how to trade the corporate grind for a life with more happiness, more meaning, more wealth, and more fun. And his coaching and television appearances, he's taught over 20 million people how to thrive with their purpose. Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast today.
So good to be with you, Chris. Thank you.
So I always start with, what's your story, Dan? How did you get here? If you were, that's what everyone's always interested. How did you get here?
If by here you mean coaching unfulfilled high achievers, it's because I myself was an unfulfilled high achiever. I was my very first client. My background was in the radio industry. I spent 20 years as a media executive, overseeing very successful radio brands in major markets across the United States. I was also an on-air talent, hosting things like album release shows with Taylor Swift and Maroon 5 and doing all these things that looked really great on Instagram. My life looked incredible on Facebook, and I invested so much energy into cultivating that image of success. And, for the first 15, 16 years of a 2-decade career, things were great. I really enjoyed it until I didn't. And what I found, around 2012 is that I was becoming more bored, more disinterested in my work. The wins were less fulfilling. And like many high achievers, I just tried to push through. I thought, well, I need to go accomplish something else great. If I get a bigger job for more money in a bigger city, that's going to be the answer. And I got all those things. And as I climbed to the top of, every ladder of success in corporate America, it wasn't the thing that I wanted. And the only payoff was more stress, more pressure to perform, to grab that next corporate carrot, and more unhappiness at the end of the day. So it really hit big for me around 2015. I was in the biggest job of my radio career. I was also on blood pressure medication at 38 years old. I was also battling shingles which was awful. And I remember talking to my doctor. I'm like, shingles is supposed to be for old people. What are we doing here? Like, why am I going through this? He's like, well, how's your stress level? And as I started to go within and really take assessment of my life, I built a life with so much success, but I realized success and happiness are not mutually exclusive. And that put me on a huge personal growth path to figure out who I was, not just what I did for a living. And what I realized is I did a great job of recreating my father's life. My father is a legend in the radio industry in the United States. He's in the National Radio Hall of Fame. I'd done a great job of recreating his life, but I had no idea who I was. Right. So the journey for me became, what is my purpose? Who am I at my core, aside from a job title? Do I have any identity away from my work? And as I started to explore those questions and find the answers, I realized that there are so many people that I was surrounded by who were in the same spot. If you look at the research from Gallup, for the last 20 years, they've been saying that 2 in 3 workers in America, and not even in America, this is a global statistic, are disengaged and going through the motions. So for me, it became a matter of, if I can find an answer for myself, I can teach other people how to find that answer as well. And that's what my second half of my career has been dedicated to, is helping people create success and fulfillment to go with it. And that's life on your terms. It's not necessarily the coaching industry gets a bad rap now. There's a lot of people who are like, what, you're just going to tell me to go become a coach? We've sort of built an MLM in the coaching industry, which that's a whole other discussion, but it's really about finding what that answer is for you in your second act.
Well, your story certainly hits home for me. I have suffered from the same curse. I can tell you, and tell my audience, I've suffered from burnout at least twice in my career that have been diagnosed. And we'll talk a little bit about this. My father was a workaholic, a proud workaholic, and took great pride in telling you how he would get up at 5 a.m. and work till the sun went down. And at the end of the day, that got him death. So that's not really the biggest goal that we should all have. So this is what you term as the curse of the high achiever. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about this. What causes people to become addicted to success? This curse of the high achiever.
That's a multi-layered answer. First of all, we want to look at an evolutionary level. There is part of us that is biologically programmed to desire surplus. If we go back to caveman days, right? If you had the most dried meat and the most animal skins in your cave, you were going to be set up to win during times of hardship, but you were also going to become a more attractive mate if you had all of that. You could fill your duty to procreate and perpetuate the species. So I do think some of it is hardwired in at an evolutionary level. But when we talk about the addiction to work and success, there's also a chemical thing happening in the brain. And this is the same for alcoholism, drug addiction, sex, gambling, anything can become addictive. But for a lot of people, when we get that next carrot in corporate America, when we cross the next income milestone, when we get a promotion, that comes with not just financial, but also social rewards. There's praise and validation. You'll get an attaboy or attagirl from your parents. You can post about your new career win on Facebook and everybody is going to smash the like button and make you feel really good. You can post the picture on Instagram of that new house you bought and people are going to be like, wow, Chris made it. Look at, he's doing great. And all of that praise and validation, like any addictive substance, begins to release dopamine in the body, right? We have a chemical high, but like any addictive substance, any addict will tell you that the high never lasts. Right. The body is designed to return to homeostasis. So we get this rush of chemical joy, and then we kind of come right back down to where we are, which is why people need to fill the addiction more and more. You need another drink. You need another bump of cocaine. You need to get another promotion or get to that next level of income. But ultimately, it's like a dog chasing its tail. There's no end game. There's no point where there's going to be enough success that is ever going to feed the addiction. It's sort of like trying to take a colander and fill it with water, right? You're just never going to get there. So there's an evolutionary component, there's a chemical component, but the third piece that we want to look at when it comes to this idea of being addicted to success is not so much about nature and what's happening chemically in the body. It's also the nurture aspect. When I'm working with clients, we look heavily at your childhood attachments. Who did you have to be to get praise and validation as a kid? How did you get to love and security? What did you learn was the path to be seen, to be heard, to be experienced? And that is often really telling. And I didn't, this was one moment in my life in 46 years on the planet, one brief moment that I didn't unlock until right before my 40th birthday, but it was very instructive for me. I had just finished my 6th grade year of school. And I remember my mom putting all these trophies on the mantle, recognizing my superlatives from the school year. There were trophies that Daniel was student of the year, Daniel was most popular, Daniel was most athletic.
Right.
There was a trophy with a couple ballroom dancing that Daniel and his girlfriend were voted class couple. And my mom would show these trophies off to all of her girlfriends when they came over to the house, except there was one problem as I watched her do this. I never won any of those trophies. My mom went to a trophy store and had them made.
Oh,
so she could, I know people are like, oh my God, that's crazy. And it kind of is. But, for my mom, who, God love her, never got beyond a 9th grade education and dropped out of school to take care of her siblings. She never had the experience of going and building success on her own. So she wanted to be great at something, and she decided she wanted to be great at being a mother. And I realize all that in hindsight, but 12-year-old Dan, as he was watching all this unfold, made 2 decisions and 2 beliefs that shaped the course of my life. Number one, who I am authentically is not enough to be proud of. Because the real story of my 6th grade year is I was a social wallflower. I was terribly shy. I was a pretty good student, but I was bullied every single day. And it was so bad for me that I got bullied by the nerds, right? It was the kids with the pocket protectors and the suspenders that shoved me into lockers in the locker room. So I was like sub-nerd. But I decided who I wasn't enough to be proud of, and to be worthy of love and success and praise, I needed to become the guy who won all the trophies. And starting the following summer, while all the other kids would be out at basketball courts or going to the pool or chasing girls or going to the mall, I would get up at 6 a.m. on summer vacations and start going to work with my dad at his radio station. I started learning the radio industry. I had my first on-air job, as a DJ at 16 years old. And of course, my parents were proud, and they're like, Daniel's doing so well, which reinforced this belief that love is conditional and I need to earn it. And my parents did the best they could. There's no shame or blame here.
Sure.
But all of the beliefs that we carry about ourselves, the way that we look at the world, are usually formed in the first 0 to 10 years of life, because our prefrontal cortex isn't developed, it's not fully online, and that's where we could create an internal working model of what our place in the world is. And I took this idea and all the way up the corporate ladder until I physically and emotionally collapsed. There are 3 components there, but a lot of the work that I do in coaching clients is informed by attachment theory. We have to look at your relationship to success. Are you driven by anxiety, the desire to be liked, to feel good enough? Or are you driven by avoidance when it comes to workaholism? There's a lot of people that didn't get their needs met in the early years of life, and they believe, hey, I can only depend on me. It makes it hard for those people to delegate in a work setting. And a lot of times they use the work as a way to push away emotional intimacy and vulnerability. And it doesn't really matter whether you're anxious or avoidant, all roads in that scenario are going to lead to burnout. So that's a big part of unpacking, just not necessarily, observing the fact that, hey, maybe I'm a workaholic. It's understanding the why.
Right. Why you're a workaholic. A very interesting table topic for dinner sometime with a group of highly successful people. Ask them how their childhood affected how they're successful today. And I'm going to keep that one in mind, because especially in our industry. So I'm in the wealth management business, and our wealth management business, it's all about numbers, right? Numbers. Yeah, it's all about yeah, tendencies. You want security through financial gain, through income, through investments. This is what you hear. But at the end of the day, sometimes those things are at the expense of the things that are really and truly important. Things like your friendship, your family, your free time, where you go, your faith. So how do we find real, I'm going to say, emotional security? How would somebody go about that?
Yeah, emotional wealth versus financial wealth, right?
Right.
And you use the money example, and that is just one example. St. Thomas Aquinas wrote hundreds, thousands of years ago about the four, what he would call replacements for God that we're all chasing. It's money, power, pleasure, or what he would call honor, but what he really meant was social validation, right? Like the praise. And everybody listening to this podcast has one of those that drive them more. For me, money is the one that I use as an outlet to security. There's some people driven by power. I mean, my favorite TV show is Succession on HBO. And that's literally a story of people who would rather become sociopaths than not have power. Right. So you have to figure out sort of what your thing is. But at the end of the day, it's also remembering that nothing external to a human being can create a sustainable internal experience. Right. We believe that money is going to give us security. And there were a lot of people that built a lot of wealth in the crypto market, and they had a really rough past 6 months if you went and talked to them, right? Security is generated from within. It's in knowing who you are. It's being connected to yourself, to your gifts. Money is just the byproduct of you living in your purpose and, using your unique thing, whatever that is, to help improve the lives of others. When you're connected to that gift and you can solve those problems for people, you're always going to have a path to income. But most people are using money or power or pleasure. They think it's the end, right? When I have 7 figures in the bank, when I have 10 million, when I have 100 million, then I will be enough. When in fact, money is just the means to the end. There's nothing wrong. Money's great. I want to have as much of it as possible, but money will allow me to better support the charities that I believe in. Money gives me an opportunity to create experiences with friends that add fun and joy to my life. But the money in and of itself doesn't really have much value. And we see this, right? I mean, you work in wealth management, so your listeners will probably be familiar with the name Thomas Lee, huge financial guy, right? Invented the leverage buyout worth billions of dollars. And yet 78 years old, and he killed himself in his office. So, clearly money is not the ultimate answer. I think we know that deep down, but we live in a society that's, telling us, consume your value, consume your security, when in fact, it's a matter of cultivating it within yourself.
No, I think your work on the why, and I know this podcast, we've had several speakers talk about the why, your purpose. I've quoted one of my favorite books, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. And I've also done a podcast, Every Hero Needs a Quest. And everyone needs something, a why, to keep them motivated, to keep them moving. And to your point, it's usually not money. It's something that motivates you as an individual that really is important to you. But maybe you could expand a little bit about that why and how you help your clients find their why.
Eventually, in doing this work for nearly a decade now and going on the journey myself, the idea of the why, there's only 4 that I've ever, 4 reasons I've ever seen that have gotten people out of bed to get them to show up for their purpose. Number 1, you might be driven to prove the naysayers wrong. When I made this transition out of what was the family business in radio into coaching, there were a lot of people that weren't on board with that. My ex-girlfriend at the time was not a believer in my business. My father urged me every day to go back to radio, not because they didn't want to be supportive. These are people that just didn't want to see me suffer, and they didn't want to see me fail. They had the best of intentions, but there was a big energy within me at first of like, hey, screw you. I'm going to show you I can do this.
Right.
Now, it's not a sustainable long-term energy. If the only way you can show up for your purpose is to have a target aimed at somebody else, that's going to cause a collapse at some point, but it can get you going. Number two, you might want to take the people that believe in you and believe in your vision, and you might want to prove them right, that their faith in you was not misplaced. So those are two ways that you can get started. But number three, by having a why, it's that your work allows you to better take care of the people that you love. You know, there's a lot of people that come into my coaching practice who grew up in a home where the demonstration of love was sacrifice. Somebody who stayed in a job that they hated, they threw their real dream away and they took this mundane 9-to-5 job that they weren't even fulfilled by, but they did it because, I'm going to sacrifice myself, my purpose to take care of the family. And that modeled behavior ends up being what a lot of people fall into.
Right. Keep going with it.
So when you're living in your purpose, you can better take care, not just financially, but you're going to show up as your most present, lit up self. You're going to show up with more energy, more physically and emotionally present, rather than just having a glass of wine and scrolling through Instagram at night.
Right.
And then the fourth reason is that whatever you're doing allows you to serve humanity, that there is some problem in the world that you have a gift that you can help solve, or maybe you have a creative talent within you that, you know, through that art, you're going to be able to uplift other people. But those are really the four whys I've seen. I don't think anybody's come into my coaching practice who had something that didn't fall into one of those buckets. So the goal becomes, what is your outlet? What is that special thing that you can give that's going to improve your life, but also serve others?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And it's, you know, sometimes takes people a lifetime to come up with their why. And when I say that, you know, I meet people in their 40s and their 50s and they still don't have their why. In fact, you said, you know, professionally, you're innovative at 20s and 30s, your professional decline by age of 40, but it's not a bad thing. Right. So what's your advice about staying relevant? Like, you see, when you get out of school, I remember my 20s and 30s, I certainly had a lot of energy and I was certainly spending it on building the business. And then at 40, I started to say, you know, why am I doing this? What really is the purpose of this work that I'm in? What do you think that people should do, and how do they stay relevant, and how do they, you know, focus on what really matters to them?
Well, a great book that everybody can read is from the Harvard social scientist. He writes for The Atlantic also, but a gentleman by the name of Arthur Brooks. It's called From Strength to Strength. And this book, when he laid out the neuroscience and the data, helped me completely understand why I just fell off a cliff in my radio career. But, you know, as Arthur Brooks would explain it, we have two opportunities for success in our life. That in the early parts of our 20s through our 30s up until midlife, there is a fluid intelligence curve, that we have a greater capacity in the brain to take in complex amounts of information and to take it in at great volume. And we can process that information quickly, and we can use it to solve really complex problems. This is the time in our life when we are most innovative, right? Most tech founders are usually all under 35, right? Because they're on their fluid intelligence curve. The problem is that around age 35, your fluid intelligence starts to decline. There's a lot of neuroscience reasons for this. Some people have theorized that your prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking part of your brain, which is the last to fully develop, is the first to start to decline. But that fluid intelligence starts to go away. And you can see this right now if you look in the world, because the decline starts around age 35 and it hits, you know, it hits the ground and explodes around age 50. Right. But you can see this in current events. Mark Zuckerberg is how old?
Right.
He's 38.
Yeah.
He started this Facebook career 20 years ago, which is also 20 years is about the half-life for when most people have done their greatest work, according to the data that Arthur Brooks presents. So while the rest of the world is going all in on artificial intelligence, Zuck is over here going, nah, I just want to create virtual reality worlds that everybody can live in. And we're all going to go to the metaverse. And interesting idea, but his goal was to have 1 billion people in the metaverse. They've sold 20 million pairs of these Oculus goggles and nobody cares. The Facebook stock is declining. The company is less relevant than it was. Practical example of somebody who's probably coming down the back end of his fluid intelligence curve. Elon Musk is 51 years old, revolutionized cars, electric vehicles. It's done great things. Twitter has been an abject disaster for him, that acquisition, and it's starting to affect the Tesla earnings and stock. So here's the thing. Most people, particularly when you're a high performer, will just try to push harder, grind harder when they feel themselves starting to slip. It's not even so much that you're running toward a purposeful goal. You're just running not to fall behind at that point in your life. But there is a second opportunity, a gold mine of success that exists for people in the second half of their life. And that would be called a crystallized intelligence curve, right? This is an opportunity where people can take their wisdom. And in the later part of life, you develop a greater capacity for language. You become more articulate. You're able to explain other people's data and work really well. So you're not necessarily innovative at that point, but you can become great at instruction. So the practical example would be, the founder who builds $1 billion company, and then at age 40 becomes a venture capitalist and just mentors other founders. In the legal profession, it would be the lawyer who is a star litigator who becomes the managing partner of the law firm. We can gracefully slide into this era of wisdom and teaching. It's part of what you're doing through this podcast, every week. But most people don't know that the opportunity exists. They keep pushing harder to reclaim the glory of years before, and they'll drive themselves into burnout and emotional and physical decline in the process.
I love that. Actually, I've never even heard it in those terms before and how you put it, but it's so true. I know many people now and around my age group, and myself included, who have moved to an executive chair role so that I could mentor others who have, a lot more energy and innovative and creativity and things that, frankly, I've lost interest in so that I can spend my time doing things like this, which I enjoy, mentoring and teaching people. So I've seen it in real life examples. And we're also seeing it with, Jeff Bezos and him moving to executive chair. You see this, Steve Jobs did the same thing, Bill Gates. You've seen this trend, and I've never actually heard it articulated the way that you articulated. So I thought that's fascinating. That's great.
Arthur Brooks would suggest that every major tech company should have somebody in their 70s on the board who's like overseeing things like marketing or overseeing finance, or somebody with that wisdom that people can rely on. My father is doing this now. He was the CEO of a major broadcast corporation. He's 72 years old, and where he is now, he's an investor, but on the board of a tech startup, and they're able to use him as a resource for wisdom at this point in his life. My dad doesn't have the energy to go learn all the new technologies or things like that, but he's great at mentorship. And that's, it really, the thing I love about that book is it helps contextualize the things you've already been doing intuitively and gives you the science as to why that's happening.
Absolutely. And in our business too, we're seeing the demographic of the older advisor bringing in the junior advisor, and the junior advisor doing or succession planning with their kids. Actually, there's a lot of applicable situations that you brought up. So there's going to be a whole podcast just on that. So I'm going to have to bring it back on. We'll expand upon that. So at this point, Dan, I don't know if you heard the format of the show, but now I do what's called a rapid fire. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and for each question, just the first thing that pops into mind. So first of all, what's your personal passion? What is your purpose now that you've done all this work on creating people's purposes? What's yours?
My purpose statement that is written down on a whiteboard over here in front of me, the purpose of my life.
So you're cheating. You're looking at it right on the board.
No, it's just, it's a purpose
it.
at the end of the day. I will say this, maybe this isn't a rapid fire answer. Most people think their purpose is a job title. They think that their purpose is their marriage or their romantic relationship, or they think purpose is their children. Purpose does not exist outside of you. It can't exist outside of you, because anything outside of you can be lost. you can lose a job. We have people right now, talented, amazing people who are being laid off for no other reason than the economy is wonky. I've had people who come to me because they've gone through a divorce or that their children have all grown up and moved out of the house and that was their purpose. And now the children have moved on and they feel stuck. They feel hopeless, right? Purpose is internal. It's really about the emotional states that you're generating within yourself. And then you share that with others through your service. So my purpose is to love all parts of myself, to love my higher power, and to feel the expansion, which results by inspiring others to do the same. There's all sorts of ways I do that, through coaching, through interviews like this, through public speaking. Those are just vehicles through which I live my purpose. But that would be, again, not a rapid fire answer, but the best answer I can give you.
Actually, it was a great answer because I think everyone can really, visualize that. And some people I know have those purposes that are external to them. So the next one is, what is your most memorable interaction with a client? What was that time where somebody had an aha moment because of you?
Oh man, I can't pick just one. Off the top of my head, I remember working with a woman who came to me who was overseeing her family business and was miserable. And she had taken over the family business. It was not aligned with what she really wanted to do. It wasn't even paying well. This was at the beginning of the pandemic. The business was on the verge of going belly up. Nothing was really working. And what we unlocked was a pattern going back to childhood, right? She referred to the business as her mother's baby. I'm taking care of mom's baby. And what we realized is that was a pattern established in childhood where she had to be the responsible one to raise her brothers and sisters while her mom was working. Like they would be out of the house. She had to take care of her siblings. Her life had been built around taking care of mom's children. And this was just another way in which she was using that pattern. The problem is in what she learned through taking care of everybody else and sacrificing herself is she could be loved, she could be accepted, be part of the family unit. And once we sort of illuminated that pattern and did some healing around that, not only did she rescue the family business from bankruptcy, it started to turn record profits. They sold it for a lot of money. And now she's got her own business in the fitness industry, doing what she loves and making way more money than she ever had when she, before the coaching process. So it was really, that's an interesting tie between just the childhood patterns of thinking and the daily, the Groundhog Day that we can all live in as an adult, where every day feels the same and we don't know how to get out of it.
Yeah, I love that one too. That's great. And lastly, how do you want to be remembered?
How do I want to be remembered as somebody who just gave a little bit more than he took? That's it. I saw a great post online recently that talked about the Queen, right? She died about 5-6 months ago. Right. Here's somebody who's like this legendary figure, and think of what she meant to England. Nobody talks about the Queen anymore.
I saw that exact same post. Yeah. I thought exactly the same as you. I was like, yeah, they're right. For 100 years almost.
Whether or not I'll be remembered, 5-6 months beyond my death, who knows? And it really doesn't matter. But I want to be known in this lifetime, with whatever time I have left, as somebody who just inspired, who brought joy, brought positive energy into a room, and gave a little bit more than I took.
That's awesome. And Mason from, the Life Amplified is great podcast. I think what we can all take from this is, success is great. Don't get me wrong. And it is great to have purpose. It's great to have your why, but it can lead to burnout. I've been in this business quite some time, and I've seen burnout not only in my industry, I've seen it in other industries. And now we know some of the psychology around why that is and some of the things that you can do about it. So Dan, this has been a great podcast. Thank you so much for being onto it. I highly encourage everyone to listen to your podcast. Before we go, any final words for our audience?
No final words. Just been a pleasure to be here. And if anybody needs some help, some one-on-one coaching to move through that success addiction to find your fulfillment, you know where to find me. You can find me on any of the socials, go to my website, but I'm happy and willing to serve.
Excellent. And I will put the same offer up. If you feeling that you don't have a purpose, you want to talk to us, I've always done the coffee with Chris. We have a virtual coffee, and it's been very successful. I had a lot of great conversations with a lot of people. With that, thank you, Dan, for being part of Turning the Page, and look forward to the next episode.
You bet. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining me on Turning the Page. What did you learn from today's episode? If you follow me on LinkedIn, please drop me a comment there. I'd love to chat with you about it over a virtual coffee. Send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can do so at our website. The link's in the show notes. I'm Chris Reynolds, and until next time.